Hey guys, what's up, and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about something that I've been seeing heavily discussed online, and people have a lot of thoughts, and I wanted to talk about it here because shit has kind of gotten weird, let's put it that way. So, as you might know, Lily Rose Depp and Abel Tesfaye from The Weeknd are going to be in this show called The Idol. Now, the main reason why I'm talking about this at all is because Rolling Stone wrote an article about this show and all the fuckery that kind of has been going on, and I'll discuss the fuckery in a second. But basically, what brought a lot of people's attention to the Rolling Stone article in the first place is that Abel Tesfaye tweeted saying, "Rolling Stone, you mad," or something along those lines. I'm not going to insert the clip just due to copyright because we are dealing with HBO. So I will link it down below, but in the clip, if you don't feel like watching it, basically it's The Weeknd and Lily Rose Depp as their characters in the show The Idol, and they're talking about the following, and they're talking about how Rolling Stone is kind of a magazine that nobody gives a fuck about anymore. Obviously, recently Rolling Stone wrote an article in real life about them, so they're kind of using the show to shade Rolling Stone in real life, if that makes sense. I suppose it's supposed to be meta, but a lot of people just found it childish. Now, all of this will make more sense once I tell you about the Rolling Stone article itself. Okay, so there are a series of things that went wrong with basically everything to do with this show. I'm gonna just list you those reasons so you know what's coming up. First of all, they fired the OG director, Simetz. They fired her and replaced her with the guy who did Euphoria, Sam Levinson, and Abel Tesfaye, The Weeknd. So there was a big change made in terms of everything if you're gonna change the director. Also, because of this first initial change, everything else is impacted. So the storyline was impacted. We're gonna talk about that as well. The storyline changed from being occult-centric to being what is described as a fucked up sex fantasy, so we'll get into that as well. The storyline changing too affected costs, and on top of that, because all of these changes were made, the timing of it all between The Weeknd's own schedule with his tours and everyone else got fucked up. Those are the main factors that have created this massive social media shitstorm. The Idol, how HBO's next Euphoria became twisted torture porn. 13 sources tell Rolling Stone that The Idol, Sam Levinson's new show with The Weeknd and Lily Rose Depp, has gone wildly, disgustingly off the rails. Lily Rose Depp as a glamorous, troubled pop star, The Weeknd as a slimy, modern cult leader. Supporting roles for Blackpink's Jennie, Troye Sivan, and a handful of other buzzy stars. And in demand, director Sam Levinson at the helm. For months, the hype machine has been at full tilt for HBO's upcoming series, The Idol, which is being billed as a darker, crazier, and more risque version of Levinson's smash hit Euphoria. Levinson and Abel The Weeknd Tesfaye are the sick and twisted minds behind the sleaziest love story in all of Hollywood, HBO's words. That follows pop superstar Jocelyn Depp as she navigates the seedy underbelly of the music industry and falls under the spell of Tedros Tesfaye, who cares? A mysterious owner of a popular LA nightclub who secretly runs a cult reminiscent of NXIVM and Scientology. Though the show was ordered to series in November 2021, it's been months since HBO gave a concrete update about when The Idol will debut. One source with knowledge of the production schedule tells Rolling Stone the network initially hoped for The Idol to premiere last fall, taking over the Sunday time slot open by House of the Dragon, which ended in October. Yet, teaser trailers have come and gone, and HBO can still only offer a vague later this year. Production sources tell Rolling Stone that even they are in the dark on when the show will make it to air and have little idea of what the final version will look like, claiming the production was plagued by delays, reshoots, and rewrites. It was, let's just say, a shit show, one says. The first public inkling of trouble came last April when director Amy Simetz of The Girlfriend Experience and She Dies Tomorrow suddenly exited with roughly 80% of the 6-episode series finished. HBO addressed the news by confirming The Idol was set to have a major creative overhaul that would be adjusting the cast and crew. There was little explanation for the shakeup except for reports that Tesfaye, who is co-creator, felt the show was heading too much into a female perspective. So everything we've read so far already sounds like a shit show. Having the majority of a series done with a particular lens, and I'm going to talk about this in the writing aspect because that's where my qualifications are. In a writing aspect, I've never written a show, granted, but with whatever writing project you have, if you're almost done and then someone's going to scrap it and start anew, basically everything falls apart. Because even if you keep the same characters, the storyline makes sense with certain characters. If you have characters that only fit A and you're putting B, then all the characters have to change so B sounds realistic. Does that make sense? So just that aspect alone. I also am not really sure what the Weekend Tesfaye means with the female perspective. Obviously, we never will really know because what was meant to be in production won't go into production, so the original story, who knows? I can only imagine it would be the female perspective as someone who is pulled into a cult and happens to be a woman, so the female's perspective on what is happening to her and maybe different treatments she might have within said cult because she is a woman, and that affects the dynamics. I'm assuming that's what that is in reference to. But again, this is all kind of like writing an article about something that didn't happen, but we kind of have an idea of what was going to happen in the original story, but now it's being altered, so it's confusing. In interviews with 13 members of the show's cast and crew, Rolling Stone has learned the drastic delay was caused by Levinson taking over as director and scrapping the nearly finished $54 to $75 million project to rewrite and reshoot the entire thing. With Steinmetz out of the picture, HBO handed the reins to Levinson, only to have him weaken the show's overarching message, many sources say, by dialing up the disturbing sexual content and nudity to match, and even surpass that of his most successful show, Euphoria. What I signed up for was a dark satire of fame and the fame model in the 21st century, one production member explains. The things that we subject our talent and stars to, the forces that put people in the spotlight, and how we can be manipulated in the post-Trump world. However, they added, it went from satire to the thing it was satirizing. I think we've all seen movies, shows, whatever, that are very generous with the sex scenes and the nudity for no real reason. Now, granted, these people can do whatever the fuck they want in their shows and movies, but one of the first things they teach you in whatever writing class you take, whether it's for movies, short stories, or whatever, there should be a reason for things. And that's not just nudity. In this case, we're talking about nudity and sex, but generally speaking, you shouldn't make, especially acts of violence, happen just to make them happen. There has to be a reason why, or else it might be read as this person is kind of fetishizing this, you know, like the same way that there are movies and shows that I've seen that I find have a very weird take on assaults and have assaults happen for no actual reason related to the story. But that seems, as far as I can understand, as what is being alluded to. And understandably, some people might be uncomfortable with that, also because when you sign up to be part of a project, whatever job you may have, when it takes such a drastically different direction, you're like, okay, what the fuck is this? 4 sources say that Levinson ultimately scrapped Steinmetz's approach to the story, making it less about troubled starlet falling victim to predatory industry figure and fighting to reclaim her own agency, and more of a degrading love story with a hollow message that some crew members describe as being offensive. It was like any rape fantasy that any toxic man would have in the show, and then the woman comes back for more because it makes her music better, one production member explains of Levinson's version. Levinson and Tesfaye did not respond to requests for comment, however. After the story published, Tesfaye posted a clip from The Idol writing, "Rolling Stone, did we upset you?" In a statement provided to Rolling Stone, Depp called Levinson the best director she's ever worked with, saying, "She has never felt more supported or respected in a creative space, my input and opinions more valued." HBO called The Idol one of the network's most exciting and provocative original programs, in a statement to Rolling Stone, adding, "The creative team has been committed to creating a safe, collaborative, and mutually respectful working environment, and last year the team made creative changes they felt were in the best interest of both the production and the cast and crew." I don't know anything about Levinson apart from what we're reading. Whether he's bad at his job or not, I think this article will display, so I won't have to tell you shit. Everything being done here to me seems, to the very least, a massive mismanagement. Even just what we've heard here, and we're not even halfway, it's reminding me of all the drama with that other movie. I'm removing it from my memory because I read too much about it. This is the movie. The Idol was dreamed up by Tesfaye, his production partner Reza Fahim, and Levinson, going into development in June 2021, with HBO ordering it to series that November. All three are credited writers, along with writer Joe Epstein and Succession's Mary Laws. Seimetz, whose indie psychological thriller style seemed to be a good fit for the show's dark and sinister themes, was announced that month as a director. But three crew members allege Seimetz seemed set up to fail from the start. When she arrived on set 7 weeks before the show started filming, she was given half-finished scripts, a first-time showrunner in Epstein, a tight schedule, and near impossible expectations from HBO, those sources say. Amy was doing her best in an impossible situation, but she was going to lose this no matter what, one production member says. Honestly, I think HBO handed her a shit stack. Two sources familiar with the show's finances say HBO had wanted to keep costs low, with a series budget around $54 million, or roughly $9 million an episode, for the 6-episode series. That's about half the budget of Euphoria's upcoming third season, which is expected to cost at least $110 million. The teens drama second season, which had 8 episodes, cost more than $97 million, and its first season budget was over $47 million, according to California Film and TV tax credit records. Despite the constrained allowance, the network allegedly expected Seimetz to deliver Euphoria-esque results, complete with music videos and using expensive mansions, nightclubs, and stadiums as sets. Again, I'm not a professional in that arena. I don't know how much everything costs, but if people from the inside are saying this was never going to work, you have to wonder, was the idea to push Seimetz out the whole time, kind of like waiting, procrastinating until the last minute to push someone out because what they came up with was not what you wanted all along, so instead of actually communicating, she was just pushed out. The timeline was also tight. Production sources claim filming began in late 2021 and went into hiatus the following April. Euphoria Season 2 reportedly took roughly 7 months to film, and House of the Dragon production took 10 months. Seimetz had a hard out because she was booked for an acting role on Netflix's DC show Sweet Tooth. Another director was reportedly expected to step in or take over shooting the finale, and Seimetz would handle post-production from her shoot in New Zealand. Tesfaye's availability was also limited since he was preparing to embark on a worldwide tour in early July. In addition, Levinson was largely absent from the Idol set early on, his time instead devoted to wrapping up Euphoria's second season, which was being filmed on the lot next door. One of the first times two crew members recall seeing Levinson physically on the Idol set was a few weeks into production, which was also the day Depp was filming her first intimate scene with Tesfaye. Another stressor, sources say, was that while Seimetz was entrusted by HBO to supposedly put her stamp on the show, Levinson had an entirely different vision of what the Idol should be. I went into the Idol thinking this might be an interesting collaboration, but I left it pretty convinced that Levinson is not quite collaborative, one source says. It's really frustrating seeing Amy doing her damn best to turn around some kind of product that she can be somewhat proud of to HBO, and then for HBO to turn around and have Sam get essentially a blank check to turn it into Euphoria Season 3 with pop stars is extremely, extremely frustrating. So the other thing is that allegedly Levinson was barely on set. I'm trying to understand, how are you going to put together a show that's cohesive when you're barely there? And I mean, this is all allegedly, of course, but if the cast, the crew members, if they're barely seeing you, there's already a problem because you should be the most visible person there. You should be hands-on, like that is your entire job. So it's also interesting to me that someone who wanted to change the entire story wasn't actually then there when their version of the story was being... You know what I mean? It doesn't add up to me. It's like you don't like one story so much that you throw all of it in the trash to then put your story, and then you're not even there for your story. You see where I'm confused? Of those who worked on the production's first iteration, many say they were fans of the original script, describing it as a layered narrative that was driving home a message about the trappings and exploitation of fame. One crew member describes having their choice of several other prominent opportunities and signing up for the Idol purely because they were impressed with the story. It was gripping, I couldn't put it down, another says. As promising as those initial scripts were, the scripts for the final episodes were still only half finished and the finale completely unwritten. Seimetz was encouraged encouraged by HBO and producers to put her own spin on the show and write the last episode, a source explains. As a result, Seimetz was polishing up scripts and writing while directing. She also had her assistant, who had no previous credited writing experience, writing scenes, with HBO making the assistant a staff writer last January. Organization quickly evaporated, mainly due to changes in the script, sources say. One production member says the first version of the show went through more than 20 rewrites, saying scripts were being updated constantly. We did it every fucking day. It was insane. It did start drastically changing, another production member confirms. It was kind of a joke how many revisions there were. Whether it was changing somebody's name or whether it was something more intensive, like completely changing the scene and taking away a story. Eventually, the crew say they stopped getting one-liners, an industry term for daily schedules of what was being shot, and the few one-liners that were given out quickly became useless due to changes, sources say. Decisions were being made on the fly, frustrating several crew members who say they felt they could never properly prepare for the next day of work. I'd be driving home at the end of the day, and they'd be like, oh, we're adding a new scene, but it hasn't been written yet, one says. Still, HBO executives in Tesfaye were supposedly pleased with Seimetz's early cuts and the show's direction, according to a person familiar with the matter. However, when the show went on break in April before the finale episode was to be filmed, things drastically changed. Seimetz was out and Levinson was stepping in. All of this screams extremely amateur to me. You're actively choosing to not be organized because rewriting scenes, changing names, these are not things that should be happening from one day to the other, to the point where the people who are actually there to do their jobs don't even fucking know what to expect, how to prepare, and so on and so forth. Because I really do think, like in any other job, it's a collaborative effort, because if you come with your script, but the crew doesn't know anything, the cast doesn't know anything, things just fall apart real quick and it's a domino. If Levinson decides that he wants to change everything the fuck up, you have to come up with a plan of how you're going to make that work. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to change everything and what? Live, laugh, love, hope for the best. Like, truly, what did you think was going to happen? A report from April blamed the show's overhaul on Tesfaye, who was reportedly unhappy that the story was focusing too much on Depp's character, according to Deadline. A source with knowledge seconds that Tesfaye was the reason behind the shakeup, wanting to tone down the cult aspect of the storyline and pivot into something else entirely, dropping the quote-unquote feminist lens through which the show was being told as a result. It was like The Weeknd wanted one show all about him. Sam was on board with that, another source explains to Rolling Stone. However, two crew members claim Tesfaye's schedule made it difficult for him to be the show's primary focus. One crew member explains, it was really frustrating because they were working so hard to make it possible to shoot and be released with his concert, or whatever his timeline was, and it all got thrown out the window. It's kind of difficult also to tell how in all of this he was, because it seems like he had a say, obviously, but it also seemed like he never was there either, so I don't get where the responsibility is on his end as well, but I think that will forever be unclear. In April, the show went into hiatus, and sources believed the break was to regroup and work out the finale. However, cast and crew members say they were blindsided when they learned from news articles that the show was being overhauled and Seimetz was leaving. I'm really heartbroken that Amy wasn't there to see it through, one cast member says. She put her neck on the line for the project. She really tried to make it work and fit a square peg in a round hole, only for all of that work to be eradicated and overwritten by Sam Levinson. When production of The Idol resumed in May 2022, a majority of crew members from the first shoot did not return, according to 5 production sources. I'm not sure I would have taken it if I had been asked to return, one production source says. It was just really tough, very scarring. The cast was also gutted, blindsided some of the little-known actors who thought they had landed their big break and now were wiped from the show. However, talent with noteworthy names remained, including singer-songwriter Troye Sivan and Suzanne. Levinson then upped the cast star power even more throughout filming, with the additions of Bodies, Bodies, Bodies breakout Rachel Sennett, Dan Levy, Hank Azaria, Moses Sumney, and mega producer Mike Dean. I don't know any of these people. I'm very out of the loop. Casting K-pop superstar Jennie of Blackpink was the biggest get for Levinson. Under the show's hashtag and teaser trailers, her stans steamrolled comment section to cheer on the singer in her first acting role, but crew members claim Jennie has barely any airtime and an inconsequential story arc. It was like 3 or 4 lines per episode for her, a production source says. They didn't let her talk that much. Her job was to sit there and look pretty, basically. Crew members who stuck around for the revamped show say the working environment was no better than the first shoot, and no one from HBO was stepping in to make sure the production was kept on track, two sources claim. What was supposed to be a 3-month shoot from May to July ended up stretching into September, despite the cast and crew celebrating at a wrap party in July. Come October, even more filming took place. I was so drained by the end of it, one crew member says. I was like, I can't have a job make me cry every day because I have 2 hours to sleep and I'm being pulled 100 directions because nobody knows what they're doing or nobody knows what they want because we don't know what we're filming. Once again, sources point to constant changes in the script being the show's most pressing issue. Levinson, who was coming off a hectic Euphoria production, which had its own issues throughout the season, continued his frenzied pace over The Idol. There was always his sense of chaos because we never had a plan on what was going to happen today or tomorrow or the next scene, one crew member explains. There were also divisions amongst Levinson's inner circle, the few cast members that remained from Steinmetz's shoot and higher-ups at HBO, two sources say. One production member described feeling like a child of divorce, trying to tiptoe around the opposing parties. Levinson allegedly stopped sending scripts to HBO and certain department heads, according to people familiar with the matter. I got the vibe that the mood on set was, what's HBO gonna do? Pull the plug? Yeah, right. If they want a 3rd season of Euphoria, they'll give me what I want. We're just gonna do what we want, and if HBO execs have a problem with that, that's their problem, they explain. Truly, what I'm getting from this article is just a complete lack of organization. Like, the moment they changed Steinmetz out for Levinson, everything went to shit. Like, that is the moment. Starting with Levinson, from there, everything just went to shit. And I really don't know if this is one of those cases of people just thinking they're going to wing it, but this very much gives me the vibe of a student who has to write a 50-page paper and hand it in the next day, and he thinks he's just going to pull an all-nighter and somehow get an A. It's kind of crazy to me because Levinson did work on Euphoria, and I didn't ever watch Euphoria, so I'm not going to comment on anything related to that. But there is experience there. It's not like Levinson just came out of nowhere with no idea of what the fuck to do. So I'm also wondering, how do you not get massive, if not anxiety, how do you not worry about the quality of what you're gonna make if shit is so constantly up in the air, so constantly edited, to the point where it's all disjointed? Because that's the problem with editing as well. It has to continue to be cohesive. You can change the plot, but you also have to think of everything that came before you change this part of the plot. Because if everything that came before doesn't make sense with this plot point, then you have a problem. And it's also like changing this plot point also changes everything that happens after, so it's not like you can just put a part in and leave everything else the same, you know what I mean? So the editing is extremely important, also just for the continuity, not only of the story, but the characters' behaviors. A major concern among the crew, according to 4 production sources, was Levinson chipping away at the show's original messaging, creating a distorted and jarring story that lost its overall impact. Although Tesfaye is credited as co-creator and a writer, 3 crew members with knowledge of the situation claim he barely touched a script during the reshoots. It was a show about a woman who was finding herself sexually, turned into a show about a man who gets to abuse this woman, and she loves it. At various points, Levinson's script contained disturbing sexual and physically violent scenes between Depp and Tesfaye's character, 3 sources familiar with the matter claim. In one draft episode, there allegedly was a scene where Tesfaye bashes in Depp's face, and her character smiles and asks to be beaten more, giving Tesfaye an erection. This scene was never shot, the source says. Another proposed scenario was for Depp to carry an egg in her vagina, and if she dropped or cracked the egg, Tesfaye's character would refuse to quote-unquote rape her, which sent Depp's character into a spiral, begging him to quote-unquote rape her because she believed he was the key to her success. This scene was also not filmed because production couldn't find a way to realistically shoot the scene without having Depp physically insert the egg, another source explains. I'm just saying this as a potential viewer. I don't think I'm going to watch this, but as a potential hypothetical viewer, if your story relies on someone carrying an egg in their vagina, truly pull the plug right there and then. Like, you cannot be saved. You are too far gone, okay? If you're into whatever you're into in the bedroom, that is completely whatever, you know? as long as it's legal and consensual. Duh. You can't, though, make shit like this for the general population and think that they're going to really be into it and not find it weird. If you're just catering to a particular demographic, go for it. But you also can't expect cast members, crew members, whoever who was there and who was there from the beginning, knowing what the story was supposed to be at the beginning, not be weirded out by the fact that you're not just changing the story, but you're choosing, let's just say, provocative themes, and I think that's a tame way of putting it. It was like, what is this? What am I reading here? Yeah, same. One of the sources says, it was like sexual torture porn. Two crew members say it's unclear what will actually wind up in the show, as scripts were being changed daily and scenes were constantly being shot and reshot. Many say they're unsure where the show is headed and what will be used in the final cut. Although Steinmetz's version of The Idol was also going to contain sex scenes and nudity, production sources claim Levinson dramatically ramped up the explicit content, a move that is quickly becoming his calling card. During both seasons of Euphoria, Levinson faced criticism for employing often gratuitous nudity in a show about teenagers. Actresses on that series, including Sydney Sweeney and Minka Kelly, have lightly danced around the subject in interviews, but admitted they pushed back on some of Levinson's request for even more nude scenes. There are moments where Cassie was supposed to be shirtless, and I would tell Sam, I don't really think that's necessary here. He'd be like, okay, we don't need it, Sweeney told The Independent. It's almost such an extreme that it's like there is no message, one Idol crew member says. There is no point. They're just trying to see how much of a reaction they can get. During Steinmetz's production, it was whispered around the set that the $54 million budget cap had ballooned to $75 million according to production sources. Considering the Elite Craft Services setup, with kombucha and cold brew on tap, the caliber talent, and constant delays due to day-to-day changes, the amount doesn't seem to be that much of a stretch. But to see an entire $54 to $75 million first production scrapped for the remaking of the same show, now with an untold budget and endless resources at hand, struck some production members as wasteful. One crew member, noting their decades-long experience in Hollywood, says while there is plenty of excess spending in entertainment industry, throwing away Steinmetz's version of The Idol to redo the same show was probably the most egregious I've ever witnessed in the business. So I'm not really going to comment too much on the money aspect because, like I said, I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. It definitely is a waste of money to obviously scrap any work that was done before and just start over. I think even as a basic dumb bitch who sucks with math, I can figure that one out. I'm stuck on the nudity thing. I'm sorry, I just truly am. And I personally don't have any issues with sex scenes or nudity in films. I think what bothers me more, and I think this is why I mentioned the whole creative writing aspect of it, is that when I was in creative writing classes, there was almost always the question of what is the purpose of this scene? What is the purpose of things? Now, obviously that goes for everything, period. It doesn't have to be nudity and sex, but especially with nudity, sex, and acts of violence, which were like the big three that we'd often see. Why are you doing that? What are we helping with the story, and why is it necessary? Because it's like those movies where you see people having sex, or there's someone walking around naked and it doesn't connect to anything and there's no reason for it and it's just there, like this article implies, kind of for the shock factor, which I think cheapens it because it's almost like you're admitting, hey, I don't really have a story to tell, or I don't know what to do with this scene, so I'm just gonna have a hot girl walk around not wearing any clothes. The initial story was supposed to be focused on a cult. Now, obviously, cults oftentimes have very complicated sexual aspects, right? But the thing is, there's a difference between discussing that and showing that to have a conversation about it versus showing that to be like, hey, holy shit, look, there's an orgy for no real reason. Tesfaye took advantage of his After Hours Till Dawn tour show in LA to film a scene at Sophie Stadium in September, using the thousands of fans in attendance as free extras. Depp appeared in character on stage in a gauzy white dress to deliver a monologue about a difficult past year. Tonight is incredibly special because I have the opportunity to introduce you the love of my life, the man who pulled me through the darkest hours and into the light, Depp's character said to the confused crowd before inviting Tedros, Tesfaye's character, on stage. However, production sources claim the second iteration faced same issues that plagued Steinmetz's set due to ongoing script rewrites. There was no leash on the second incarnation, a production member says. The people who were fronting the cash and HBO, they're not putting Levinson on a leash, knowing that you already have a multi-million-dollar bill, supposedly, that you can't do anything with. The production has left many wary of working again with Levinson, who they say is developing a track record of creating chaotic sets. I would never work for him ever again, one production source says. I don't think I'll watch Euphoria again after working for him and knowing how he treats his crew. This was such a strong example of just how far Levinson can really push HBO and how they will continue to cover him because he brings in money, a second source says. He's able to walk away unscathed, and everybody still wants to work with him. People ignore the red flags and follow him regardless. So I think it's pretty clear that we have a massive shit show on our hands, to say the very least. And this is by no means the end of the world in terms of if the series sucks. That's not the issue here. The issue here is everything that happened prior to that. From the crew being treated poorly, the cast potentially being treated poorly, especially the cast that's not like a big name cast, like people just randomly being fired who were supposed to be in the original iteration. All of these things are really what is concerning, because as it was said here, if Levinson just keeps getting away with shit, there is no push to change anything if you know, oh, well, it doesn't fucking matter because I'm not going to face any consequence, right? Now, I don't know what's going to happen from here on out. I know people are screaming about The Weeknd on Twitter because of the response that you saw, which I was also confused about because this article doesn't really give Tesfaye much shit. Basically, all that they said was that he wasn't super involved, but he wanted to be the main character, which I don't really think is that bad of an accusation considering everything here. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.